So what we have in front of us is a preliminary plan sketch that has had most of the elements removed from it. So it's really just a form composition. So it doesn't have any of the vertical elements, the plant material, and doesn't have any hardscape pattern defined. It's just outlines of all the edges basically of the space. And I want you to come up with something for the space. I want you to put in the plant material, and I would like for you to put in a hardscape pattern that you think is appropriate for the site. So what you'll first be presented with is just an 11 by 17 base map. Now you will have the actual CAD title block, the one that's been done through the computer. I've gone through and just done a hand sketch kind of showing you, demonstrating what I'm looking for a title block too. And you can change this up a little bit, but make sure the scale is close to what you see around here. Yeah, so you're just going to hand draw that and put your name in, the appropriate date, and the north arrow. So the first thing we need to do is just do kind of a line sketch, a conceptual sketch, trying to figure out where you want the placement of things to be. The most important part of this exercise is understanding the scale and how scale works in these drawings. In this particular drawing, this is a 20 scale, so 1 inch to this point is going to equal 20 feet. You see that you have each of these things broken down to basically 10-foot increments. So this is going to help you draw your different objects, your trees and your shrubs and your people, if you use that as a reference, and I highly recommend that. And also even the pattern of your hardscape. If you use flagstone or something else, you want to make sure it's at an appropriate scale for the drawing, so it's not really just really way off. So the first thing, you have that. So I'll show you the sketch lines. So this is just an example of what a sketch line concept can kind of be. And I've gone through and just put in canopy trees, and these canopy trees aren't just arbitrarily drawn, but drawn using this scale, the visual scale reference, the graphic scale, as a reference. And just try to be thoughtful when you do this. Try to put yourself in the space. Like I said, what's really helpful for me is to draw a person in the design, and I tend to always do this. Just draw a person in the design. You see this person right here. It's kind of your Where's Waldo. And it really helps, at least to me, it helps me see everything to a human scale. I can imagine that's myself walking through the space, and it just helps me with shrub size and also hardscape pattern size. So I highly recommend whenever you start a drawing, just draw a person or a couple of people in at key areas that you're going to be designing around, so you can always use them as a visual reference for your other objects. So I have your person drawn in. I began putting these trees in. I also make notes for myself, just to kind of inform myself of what I was thinking. And in this instance, I had these canopy trees, and I had them at 30 to 35 foot on center. That was my desire. So this is just me just kind of looking in the graphic scale and kind of eyeballing what I think these things might be, and then beginning to draw them in, and just really quickly. And this doesn't have to be complete all the way. I was also playing with some different patterns here, just trying to figure some things out. All right. So once you kind of have this done, this rough sketch, and you'd be doing these on trash paper, right, basically. So I'm doing this in Photoshop to demonstrate this to you, but doing it by hand, you would simply take your 11 by 17 and pull a sheet of trace paper over top of it, and you can begin to draw. And what you're going to want to do is then draw in the whole design, though, right? You want to make sure that you have your parcel lines, your property line, the house line. So it's going to take some drawing to get it in there, but it should go relatively quickly. And then go in and do your kind of concept sketch over top of it. Once you have that piece done, you'll transition, put another piece of trash over just to kind of refine this. And that's going to be your pen lines. So you see I went from this conceptual sketch here to actually hardlining this thing to the perfect scale. So now these trees, I believe I drew them at 30 foot on center. So they're 30 foot, not on center, not with the placement, but the 30 foot diameter, just to be perfect. And you can use circle templates. Let me turn these comments and sketch lines off. But you can use circle templates to help you get really clean and crisp lines. Just circles, and I'm just using a dot to identify the center of each circle, acting as a trunk reference. Okay, so I went through and I ended up putting, and I can zoom in here so you can see, ended up going in and just putting in a flagstone hatch here. Remember, I used that person to scale, so I made sure this was an appropriate scale. Some small canopy, understory trees rather, with some ground cover. I believe I put in a water feature here, some seating, and you've noticed to really help give your drawing depth. There's some things. There's two things you need to use, or three things to be cognizant of. The first is line weight, and what I mean by line weight, and I'll go back to my comments here. Let me just delete all that. What I mean by line weight is line thickness, and we use line weights to help us distinguish depth in a drawing in plan view. So I'm on my pencil. So if, say for instance, I draw a thin line, well, that thin line typically is going to be things on the ground plane, things that are further away from you. If you're a bird flying over the site, the things that are going to be closer to you are the things that are higher up. So your trees, your building outline. In this case, this is the pad of the building, but still, we want to outline that to just to help distinguish it from the other side elements. But the tree canopy line is going to be thicker than your flagstone path line, and by doing that, by varying, different line weights, line thicknesses, you're able to better convey depth in a drawing, and that's what line thickness and line weights are. And this is a very important concept to grasp, because this translates even into AutoCAD drawings, where you're able to assign different line thicknesses to basically do the same thing that you'll be doing by hand. So you might want to use a thicker tipped marker, or just go over it twice for your canopy trees, and maybe a thinner tipped micro marker or pen to do your finer detail ground plane work. But the important part is you want to convey depth. So that's the first thing. I said there was three things. The second thing you want to do is drop shadow. And in this, I'm just using a solid black line where I'm just shifting it up. But notice that all my shadows are going in the same direction. Okay? That's very important, right? Light cast in the same way, so all your shadows are going to push in one direction. So I had this retaining wall that's kind of winding around. For me, that was just a retaining wall. Well, not a retaining wall, but just a wall, privacy fence. So I dropped shadow on that, all the plant material. I think I put some benches in this thing, just trying to convey depth again. So that's the second thing. The third thing to be cognizant of, and that really relates to all of your illustrative drawings or colored drawings and diagrams, is going to be the idea of contrast, creating contrast in the space. So you see here I've used a hatch, and that hatch is identifying for me naturalized areas, and it's just helping define that area from this area, so it's a very clean distinction. There's contrast between it. And that concept is really important, and will also follow you through the rendering of this piece. And that is the next step, is the rendering. So once you have this pen drawing done, you'll have your third piece of trace put over top of this. And this time you're going to have, I would pen this thing out or make a photocopy of it if you have this thing drawn out, color pencil or marker to then render this drawing in. And I'm going to show you a few techniques, or a technique, I shouldn't say a technique of using the pencils, color pencils, if you haven't used them. The marker is really the same thing, it's just harder to emulate marker because it bleeds when you use them in real life on the computer, but I can emulate the pencil for you here. So I'll go back to my brushes, and I'm just going to select a pencil brush. Okay, cool. So when you do these things, I'm going to use a green color here. There are a couple of things that help make your drawings pop and stand out. This is going to be the darker side. This is where the shadow's being cast. So I'm just going to tilt this thing a little bit. So what I want to do is kind of do strokes in the same direction, kind of coming down. And single kind of streaks coming down. And I'm going to go ahead and render over top of the shrubs that my trees cover. You can still see them below. So that's cool for me. I'm just going to kind of keep on going doing this. And you would do the same thing with a pencil. Alright. And I'm not pressing really super hard right now. I'm just kind of getting the color in there. Now the way this thing works is, on the darker side, the shadow's being cast, so that shadow's going to kind of cast around it. You think it's just kind of a three-dimensional object, the tree, a sphere. So I want to get darker as I get towards that shadow mark. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of darken that edge a little bit, and I'm just going over this. So I'm just using the same color pencil and kind of going over that. Alright, maybe kind of one more time to kind of convey that depth in the drawing. Making sure to get that edge. Zoom out a little bit. So what you're trying to do is build up that edge with the color pencil, and I'm just going over it. This looks like it's being cast there. Okay. Now another technique is to go through too and add like kind of lighter tones, maybe kind of a yellowish tone here. Maybe there's some yellow in here too, just to add a little color to it so it pops a little bit. Maybe with the sunlight's kind of hitting it. So the cool part about pencils, you can kind of play with these things. So I'm just gonna erase that. And get a regular eraser. Okay. And what you want to do is kind of that same technique for all these trees. So, or at least the ones that are going to be matching. This is going to be, we'll call these, I guess, ornamental trees. And the same thing, just kind of building that up. Trying to go in the same direction. Now you could, in the Booth and Hiss examples that you see that you've been giving your assignment, I believe they color these things in all the way, but I'm just going to go in this kind of quick technique. And again, you can use markers are, I find, to be a lot faster, and they're actually my preference. Have always been my preference, even when I render now digitally. It's really kind of emulating more of the marker than this pencil type feel. You know, it's the same thing. You would kind of go over it with a light layer, not being so heavy-handed with it, and then it's just the idea of going over it again with the marker with the same color to kind of begin to darken that edge. That's just what you're doing. You're just kind of darkening that edge coming up. And again, that darker edge is against that shadow, right? I was kind of pushing with that shadow. Okay. Zoom out. And maybe I'll put a little bit of yellow in there. We're switching over. Of course, you just use your pencil, your color. Put a little hint of that in there. Okay, and we'll keep on going. You could always pick a different color, or maybe somewhat of a darker hue, or maybe a different hue altogether for these other trees. Again, it's the same thing, coming later. And you can see you can do this relatively quickly. It doesn't have to take a long time to get this thing in, just to get some color down. Make the lid a little thicker. Go a little faster. I'm just trying to keep my strokes generally in the same direction. Just really trying to build that edge up there. And a lot of it's just pressure control, just being cognizant to build that edge up. Just building that edge up. And creating that contrast between those edges and those sides. And being consistent, again, I'll just drop some yellow in, just kind of have this kind of hue that's kind of like sunlight maybe coming into this piece. Kind of on that side. Keep on. Now I won't do all these, but you kind of get the picture here. Now I'll go in and pick maybe a light gray. Try that for I'm calling this concrete. Again, I'm going to try to just go in the general same direction that I've been going. I'm going to keep these strokes more cross hatch maybe just to kind of clean them up a little bit. But see, just kind of building up as I get around these edges, maybe darken in a little bit. Okay. Maybe in this case I should put a little bit of a darker edge on that and maybe come in there. And just kind of build that up, and maybe I'd go in with a kind of a really light, not really light, maybe a little bit darker for my asphalt. You can play with some of these colors and to kind of get something that you like, maybe a little bit darker. You know, and to be super, super dark, but it's kind of nice even strokes around it. It's kind of cross-hatched. Kind of the same way though, just kind of getting that built up around it. Of course, then that would be your asphalt pieces. And you can do some variations in things. You can add color tones and different pieces to this. Maybe that would be cross-hatch, so I'm not sure. And again, if you're not happy with what you do, the beauty about color pencils too is that you can erase pretty easily. So maybe not this easy, I'm on the computer, but you get the idea. Just find a tone that you like there. For flagstone and things like that, you know, you can kind of look at natural flagstone as an example. I'm just going to go in here and maybe get kind of a darker tan tone, and okay, it's really close to the asphalt. You want to create contrast too, though, so. That looks pretty good. So just kind of come in here, maybe just do kind of the edges of it, and the stones kind of like that. I'm just adding some, try to change some of it up. But I do want to have a kind of a more dominant color through the whole piece. Let me see how fast this can kind of go. Not bad. Maybe that piece right there is all that looks good. Kind of have these pieces in there. Maybe even more yellow than that. Alright, come up some more. And it just takes some patience and playing with different color tones and seeing what looks good together. But you can begin to kind of build up something relatively quickly. And I wouldn't get color crazy, but maybe there is one more color. So that one looks like it's kind of this in between thing. It's kind of there. And you're trying to give that illusion, of flagstone, so the client gets it. You're able to convey the idea. That's all illustrations do. They're just trying to convey an idea. Especially when you're doing things by hand. Okay. You can kind of go in and get really, more detailed if you like. So you can kind of see we're beginning to kind of build this design up already. And it's really just kind of refining it and going in and coming back in, putting in your color for your understory trees and everything else. And in this case, I'd probably keep that. Maybe a darker color for this kind of vegetated walls, I'm calling it. And probably just color that green. There you go. Kind of get the gist of what I'm trying to do here. And that's basically it. It's just building up the colors and your tones. Trying not to create too much craziness between things. You want to have kind of nice flow. When you're drawing, you want the colors to mesh well together, but also provide contrast so that things read. And that's what you're trying to achieve here. You can look at other examples online, and there's tons of things in books to help give you other different styles and techniques potentially of rendering these things out. But this is really all that I'm looking for the assignment. Any questions, please let me know in person or send me an email.